man she once trusted with her life. Tonight was the first time she understood he could destroy it. It began with a single sentence, delivered as cold as the steel rail of the staircase. "Scarlett is pregnant, and you're leaving this house." Alyssa stood frozen, holding a small bowl of mashed bananas for her 1-year-old, who was giggling in his high chair, unaware his world was about to shatter. Damien didn't wait for her answer. He simply stepped closer, lowering his voice like a verdict. "Sign the papers, or I'll take him from you. No one will believe a useless woman like you." Alyssa felt something break inside her, but she whispered, trembling, "I'm carrying your child." Damien barely blinked. "Not for long," he muttered. What followed wasn't a fight. It was an execution of hope. The moment Damien's hand struck her shoulder, Alyssa stumbled backward, slipping on the cold marble. The sharp pain tore through her body, and a warm flood spread beneath her. Her little boy shrieked, tiny hands reaching toward her. But Damien grabbed him away, as though Alyssa were contagious. Scarlett appeared on the landing above, her red dress glowing under the chandelier like a mark of triumph. Alyssa clawed toward her son, gasping for breath, but Damien's voice echoed, "You're done, and no one will ever know what really happened here." But Damien was wrong, because someone had been watching long before tonight, a shadow outside the gates, a man who knew the truth behind the Blackwood Empire. And when the alarms of destiny finally rang, he moved. A black SUV rolled to a stop down the hill, its headlights off, its driver gripping the wheel with the certainty of a man who had waited decades for this moment. His name was Henry Callahan, and he carried a secret that would unravel everything Damien believed he controlled. He didn't just come to save Alyssa. He came to reclaim what had been stolen from him long ago. Tonight was only the beginning. Alyssa's blood had marked the floor, but it also marked the start of a reckoning so fierce it would shake Beverly Hills from the inside out. Yet even as sirens in the distance blended with the desert wind, Alyssa felt the weight of something else rising, a realization that Damien's cruelty was only the surface of a deeper corruption. The mansion that once sparkled at charity galas now felt like a trap built on buried lies. Somewhere in its locked rooms were documents she was never meant to see, recordings she never knew existed, and the truth about why Damien had worked so hard to isolate her from the world. She remembered the strange visitors arriving at midnight, the whispered phone calls, the sudden dismissal of staff who had grown too close to her. Every memory now formed a pattern she wished she had noticed sooner. And beneath all of it was a chilling certainty. Damien feared something, or someone, far more than he feared losing her. That fear was the thread that would soon unravel everything. For her, and before sunrise, someone would discover a truth Damien never imagined could return to haunt him. Alyssa Morgan had never imagined her life could twist so sharply from quiet hope to crushing helplessness. At 28, she had believed in simple things, warm light through kitchen windows, mornings humming with her son's giggles, and evenings when Damien appeared gentle enough to make her doubt her own fears. But life inside the Blackwood mansion had slowly taught her otherwise. Every hallway carried a whisper of control, every room a reminder she did not belong. Alyssa hid her loneliness behind soft smiles, pretending she could still fit inside the world Damien built around her, even as it tightened like a trap. She had once been a rising stylist in Beverly Hills, known for steady hands and a gentle way that made nervous actresses trust her instantly. Clients praised her calm spirit, but beneath that calm lived a girl who had lost nearly everything. Her mother's death left a wound that never closed, and the disappearance of her father when she was a child carved a silence she carried into adulthood. When Damien stepped into her life with polished charm, luxury cars, and promises of safety, Alyssa mistook his attention for love. It wasn't love. It was possession, wrapped in a smooth smile. Still, Alyssa tried to create a home. She decorated the nursery with soft blankets and painted clouds, hoping gentleness could soften the mansion's cold marble and endless glass. She cooked dinner even when Damien didn't come home. She apologized when he raised his voice. She quieted her own needs so he would not find fault. The staff noticed her shrinking spirit, but fear kept them silent. Alyssa convinced herself things would improve once their second baby arrived. She imagined family photos, holidays in Tahoe, warm mornings with 2 children laughing. She held those dreams tightly, unaware they were already slipping away. But Damien's shift was gradual and chilling. He began monitoring Alyssa's calls, questioning every purchase, criticizing her clothes, her voice, even the way she breathed when she felt anxious. His cruelty grew sharper each time she showed vulnerability. When she became pregnant again, instead of tenderness, he offered strict rules and cold warnings. Alyssa started sleeping lightly, afraid of the footsteps that echoed down the hallway at night. She held her son close, whispering comfort into his hair, promising him love, even when she no longer felt safe. The mansion's beauty became a mask, hiding a tightening, merciless cage. Yet Alyssa never told anyone. Shame kept her quiet, and hope kept her trying. She remembered the early days, when Damien brought her coffee from a small shop in Santa Monica and kissed her forehead. She clung to those fragments, pretending they still meant something. She thought if she stayed gentle, stayed patient, stayed loving, she could protect her son from the storm. But storms don't fade when you close your eyes. They grow. And Damien's storm was preparing to swallow everything. Alyssa just didn't know the past she feared most was about to return not from Damien, but from a stranger watching in silence. That stranger had traced her life for years, holding back until danger outweighed caution. He knew the Blackwood Empire better than anyone inside its walls. He knew the secrets Damien buried beneath polished floors and the crimes masked by charitable galas. He knew truths Alyssa had been denied her entire life. And tonight, as she clung to the edge of hope, he stepped closer to the mansion gates with one purpose. Alyssa believed she was alone, but she was wrong. And soon, she would learn her suffering had never gone unnoticed by anyone else. The Blackwood estate in Bel Air was a world built to intimidate anyone who entered it, and Alyssa Morgan had learned to move through it like a ghost. The mansion rose from the hillside like a marble fortress, its high glass walls reflecting the Los Angeles skyline and hiding the coldness that pulsed inside. At night, the lights from Beverly Hills glittered below, yet the house itself felt strangely hollow, as if luxury had swallowed every trace of warmth. Alyssa often walked the long hallways with her son in her arms, feeling the silence press against her chest, reminding her she had no real place in this world Damien controlled. The living room stretched almost the length of the house, with white leather sofas arranged like a showroom and a fireplace that rarely burned. Damien preferred the room spotless, untouched, as if lived-in warmth were an offense. Alyssa once tried placing a small family photo on the mantel, a picture of her holding their son at the Santa Monica Pier, but Damien removed it before the end of the day. He said photos made the room look cluttered. She understood the truth. He wanted no evidence of the life she tried to build. Downstairs, the kitchen held stainless steel counters, perfectly aligned appliances, and a cold brightness that felt more like a boardroom than a family space. Even the chef avoided speaking to Alyssa unless necessary. Damien had eyes everywhere, from the quiet staff to the security team stationed near the gate. Cameras lined the hallways, the gardens, even the driveway leading to the underground garage where Damien kept his prized cars. Alyssa sometimes wondered if any corner of the property existed where she was not watched, judged, or monitored. Yet the outside world surrounding the mansion was stunning. Palm trees curved along the driveway, and from the balcony overlooking the backyard, Alyssa could see clear across to the Pacific on fogless mornings. The pool shimmered like a sheet of glass, bordered by stone sculptures Damien imported from Europe. People passing through Bel Air admired the estate, imagining it to be a paradise. But behind the gates, Alyssa felt trapped inside a gilded cage, the kind that looked beautiful from the outside but suffocated anyone living within its walls. When Damien brought business associates to the house, the atmosphere shifted into something even more unsettling. Men in tailored suits filled the dining room, discussing deals, investments, and rumors of powerful figures in downtown Los Angeles. Alyssa sensed things beneath the surface, conversations cut short when she entered, coded remarks about money transfers, and tense glances exchanged between Damien and a man named Victor Crane. She did not know the details, but she felt danger settling over the estate like a shadow. At night, when the staff retired and the house quieted, Alyssa sometimes stepped onto the terrace with her son, hoping the cool air would calm him. From there, she could see the city glowing with life, hear faint sirens drifting from the freeway, and smell the distant ocean. She clung to these moments, imagining a future beyond the towering gates. But each time she returned inside, the mansion swallowed her again. What Alyssa did not know was that the mansion itself held secrets. Damien never intended her to uncover rooms she had never entered, files locked behind biometric security, and a truth buried deeper than any lie he told her. And one of those secrets was about to surface, because someone was finally coming up the driveway who knew exactly what Damien feared most. Tonight, too, Damien Blackwood had mastered the art of appearing flawless. To the world, he was the billionaire visionary who built Blackwood Innovations from a sleek corner office in downtown Los Angeles. Investors admired him. Politicians invited him to elegant fundraisers. Magazines labeled him one of the most influential minds of his generation. But behind the polished smile and tailored suits, Damien hid a darkness sharp enough to cut through the life of anyone who dared to stand in his way. He wasn't always cruel. Or maybe he was, and Alyssa simply mistook his charm for kindness. Damien knew exactly how to lure someone into trusting him. In the early days, he showered Alyssa with thoughtful gestures, quiet dinners, slow walks along the Malibu shoreline, and gentle words that made her believe she had finally found someone safe. But as soon as she stepped into his mansion, that softness vanished, replaced by a controlling presence that grew thicker over time. Damien studied people the way others study stock charts. He found weaknesses, then shaped them to his advantage. With Alyssa, it was her loneliness, her longing for family, her desperate need to feel loved. He used every piece of it against her. His anger didn't explode often, but when it did, the walls trembled. He never apologized, never softened, never gave Alyssa space to breathe. He monitored her movements, controlled her bank account, and dismissed her opinions with a coldness that left bruises deeper than any mark on her skin. Scarlett Voss, the woman he introduced as a legal consultant, saw those cracks and slipped into them like poison. She played her role perfectly, arriving with perfect hair, soft perfume, and a smile dripping with false innocence. Scarlett fed Damien's ego, fueled his insecurities, and whispered doubts about Alyssa whenever the opportunity arose. Together, they formed a partnership far more dangerous than Alyssa understood. Scarlett provided legal strategies designed to isolate Alyssa documents Damien could use to strip her of rights, credibility, even her sanity. And Damien offered Scarlett something she craved more than power: a place inside his empire, beside him, not behind him. Damien believed he had engineered the perfect plan. With Alyssa weakened by pregnancy, financial dependence, and emotional exhaustion, the timing felt right. Scarlett's pregnancy pushed him further. He could replace Alyssa entirely, rewrite their narrative, and bury her beneath lies constructed by legal manipulation. What Damien didn't know was that every step he took toward destroying Alyssa brought him closer to his own downfall. There were people watching him, tracking his decisions, and gathering evidence he never realized he had left behind. And one of those people was much closer to Alyssa than Damien could ever imagine. Someone who had waited decades for the moment Damien's mask finally cracked. He moved through life assuming he was untouchable, protected by money, influence, and the network of men who benefited from his rise. But no fortress is perfect. Even the strongest walls crack when built on rot. And Damien's empire had been rotting for years under the weight of secrets, betrayals, and crimes he believed buried. Alyssa sensed danger, but she didn't yet understand the scale of Damien's corruption. She only knew that each day brought a new form of cruelty, a new reminder that her husband had become someone she no longer recognized. Still, Damien felt confident. He had Scarlett, he had his wealth, and he believed he held complete control. But control is fragile, and Damien was about to learn just how quickly it slips away. Because while he orchestrated Alyssa's suffering, another force had already begun moving against him, unstoppable. The moment Alyssa Morgan realized her life was about to break beyond repair did not come with screams or chaos. It came quietly, the way storms sometimes begin, with a single breath of cold air slipping through a half-open door. She had just finished warming a bottle for her son when Damien's voice echoed from the living room, sharp enough to slice the silence. "Bring him downstairs. Now." Alyssa held her child against her chest, confusion tightening her throat as she descended the stairs into a scene she didn't understand. The living room, usually pristine, was filled with unfamiliar faces. Executives from Blackwood Innovations. 2 lawyers Alyssa had met once. A security officer posted near the front door. And at the center, Scarlett Voss, dressed in a fitted black suit and smiling like a woman who had already won. Damien stood beside her, his expression carved from stone, his eyes colder than the marble beneath Alyssa's feet. "Alyssa," he said, not bothering to greet her. "We're doing this now." "Doing what?" she whispered. Scarlett stepped forward and placed a stack of documents on the glass table. "A psychological evaluation," she said sweetly. "A preliminary request to review your ability to parent responsibly." "It's a formality." Alyssa felt the room tilt. "What are you talking about?" "I've never—" Scarlett cut her off with a sympathetic tilt of her head. "You've been unstable, Alyssa. Crying spells, anxiety, trouble sleeping, difficulty focusing. Damien is concerned." A murmur moved through the room, a ripple of judgment. Alyssa clutched her son closer. "Those are normal symptoms of pregnancy, not when they put the child at risk," Damien said. His voice carried the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "You're overwhelmed. It's time for professionals to step in." Alyssa's knees weakened. "Damien, please. This isn't fair." He didn't flinch. "Fair? You think you've been fair to this family? To me?" Scarlett slid another set of papers forward. "We're requesting temporary custody of your son until the evaluation is complete." The words crashed over Alyssa like freezing water. "You can't take him from me," she breathed. Scarlett smiled. "Legally, we can. You're in no condition to care for a child, especially with another one on the way. Stress is dangerous for pregnant women." Alyssa felt her world collapsing, piece by piece. Damien wasn't just humiliating her, he was erasing her, rewriting her identity in front of the very people who believed he could do no wrong. "You planned this," she whispered. "All of you." Damien shrugged. "You forced my hand." Her son began whimpering, sensing her fear. Alyssa rocked him gently, but her own hands were shaking. "Damien, don't do this to us." Scarlett shot Damien a glance, as if urging him to proceed. Damien nodded to the security officer. "Take the child." Alyssa stepped back instinctively. "No, don't touch him, don't." The officer approached, and something inside Alyssa broke. She screamed a raw, desperate sound that filled the mansion and froze every person in the room. She clutched her son tightly, backing into the corner, breath shaking, tears blurring her vision. "Please," she begged. "He's all I have." But Damien's face remained unmoved. "Alyssa," he said, "hand him over. This is the last time I'll ask." Her heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. And then just as the officer reached for her, a deep voice cut through the air from the front doorway. A man stood at the threshold, tall and quietly powerful. Henry Callahan had arrived, and he wasn't leaving without her. Alyssa didn't understand how her legs carried her up the staircase after Henry's sudden arrival. One moment she had been cornered, clutching her son while strangers prepared to tear her world apart. The next, Henry's voice had cracked the air like thunder, freezing Damien in place long enough for Alyssa to slip away. She escaped into the guest room at the end of the hall, the only space Damien rarely entered, and shut the door with trembling hands. Her son whimpered against her shoulder, sensing her fear, his small fingers curling into her hair as though anchoring her to the world. Alyssa pressed her back to the door, trying to steady her breathing. The entire encounter replayed in her mind, the lawyers, the accusations, the cold smiles, Damien's order to take her child. Shame burned through her. She had allowed herself to be diminished piece by piece until Damien believed she would collapse on command. And tonight he had tried to make that collapse public, a spectacle for his colleagues to witness, a final humiliation before stripping her of motherhood. The weight of it crushed her until tears spilled freely down her cheeks. She crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, rocking her son gently. "I'm so sorry," she whispered into his hair. "I should have known sooner." I should have protected us." Her voice cracked. She felt responsible for everything, the loneliness, the fear, the danger. She had convinced herself she could survive Damien's cruelty, but she hadn't realized the cost it demanded. She touched her belly, the slight curve beneath her sweater. A dull ache pulsed there, a reminder of how fragile both she and the unborn child had become. Outside the door, muffled voices rose in heated argument. Damien's fury was unmistakable, sharp and volatile. His footsteps thudded along the hallway, growing louder, then quieter, then loud again. Alyssa braced herself each time, expecting him to burst through the door. His control over her had always depended on proximity, on the threat of what he could do if she defied him. Tonight, she had defied him publicly, even if unintentionally, and she knew there would be a price. But mixed with Damien's rage was another voice, steady, firm, unshaken. Henry. She couldn't see him, couldn't understand why he had come, but she had felt something in his tone, something protective and strangely familiar. The way he had said her name carried warmth she hadn't heard in years. A quiet part of her clung to the memory, wondering who he truly was and why his presence unsettled Damien so deeply. She held her son closer, kissing the top of his head. She needed to think clearly, but exhaustion dragged at her. Her body trembled from fear, from pregnancy, from the emotional beating that had nearly shattered her downstairs. She lay back on the bed for a moment, closing her eyes, forcing herself to breathe slowly. She needed strength. She needed clarity. She needed a way out before Damien regained control. But she wasn't alone anymore. Something had shifted in the house the second Henry walked in. Damien, for the first time, felt threatened. Alyssa sensed it like a faint tremor through the floorboards. And then, just as she began to gather herself, her phone vibrated on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number flashed across the screen. "I know what he's planning. You need to leave tonight." Alyssa stared at it, frozen. And the sender claimed to know the one secret Damien feared more than anything that could destroy him forever without warning. Alyssa stared at the message glowing on her phone, feeling her pulse throb in her throat. "I know what he's planning. You need to leave tonight." The sender was unknown, the tone urgent, almost desperate. She reread the words, wondering if it was a trap, another strategy Damien or Scarlett had crafted to confuse her. But something about the phrasing felt different, human, frightened, and familiar in a way she couldn't explain. Holding her son close, she moved to the window and peeked through the curtains. The driveway below shimmered under the lights, empty except for Henry's dark SUV idling at the gate. Before Alyssa could type a reply, a second message appeared. He erased the footage, but not everything. "There's a backup. You're not safe." Her breath hitched. Footage. Backup. Someone knew what happened in the living room. Someone had seen Damien order the officer to take her child, had watched Scarlett smirk, had witnessed the quiet cruelty she had endured for years. Fear and hope twisted together, forming a trembling thread she didn't dare pull yet. She typed, "Who are you?" Her hand shook as she pressed send. No response. Downstairs, voices rose again, sharper than before. Damien was losing his temper. She recognized the strain in his tone, the way he spoke when he felt powerless. That alone terrified her. A powerless Damien was a dangerous Damien. She paced the room slowly, trying to keep her mind steady. Her son dozed against her shoulder, unaware of the world shifting beneath them. She kissed his forehead, holding him close to reassure herself that he was still here, still safe, still hers. A soft knock startled her. She turned quickly, clutching her son. Henry's low voice came from the other side. "Alyssa, it's me. I won't come in unless you open the door." She hesitated. Trust was a luxury she no longer could afford, but something about Henry's presence felt impossibly steady. She cracked the door enough to see his face. His eyes were filled with concern, a kind she had never seen from any man in the Blackwood mansion. He glanced down the hall before stepping inside. "You need to leave this house tonight," he whispered. "Damien isn't finished. He intends to take your son while you're sedated." Alyssa's stomach twisted. "Sedated? What are you talking about?" Henry pulled a small white envelope from his jacket. Inside was a prescription bottle, Alyssa's prenatal vitamins, except the label had been peeled away. "This was switched," he said softly. "It would have put you to sleep for hours." Alyssa felt the room spin. "How do you know all this?" His jaw tightened. "Because I've been watching Damien longer than you've known him." She stepped back, shaken. "Why? Who are you?" For a moment, Henry's composure cracked, revealing a grief he usually kept buried. "I'll tell you everything," he said quietly, "but not here. Not while he still has access to you." Her phone buzzed again. A final message appeared. "Check the nursery closet, behind the panel." Alyssa turned toward the hall, heart pounding. Whatever was hidden in that closet held answers she desperately needed. She walked toward the door, gripping her son, breath trembling. Henry followed, silent but alert. Inside the space, a stack of old photographs, sealed envelopes, and a single digital drive waited like silent witnesses, carrying secrets capable of overturning everything Alyssa believed about her past and Damien's power. Alyssa's fingers curled around the closet handle. And the moment she pulled it open, her world shifted with a truth she never imagined existed. The closet door creaked open, and Alyssa felt the air shift, as if the house itself were bracing for what she was about to find. The small space behind the panel looked untouched for years, yet everything inside was arranged with careful precision bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon, a stack of photographs wrapped in plastic, and a sleek digital drive tucked inside a metal case. Dust swirled in the dim light, settling onto the secrets her life had been built upon without her knowing. She reached for the first photograph. Her breath caught. Her mother young, glowing, standing beside a man Alyssa had never seen before. Except she had. He was standing behind her now, watching silently. Henry. The truth hit her so hard she had to steady herself against the closet frame. Her hands trembled as she turned toward him, eyes wide with disbelief. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. Henry lowered his head. "Your mother made me promise. She wanted you to grow up free from my past, free from the danger I carried. But I never stopped watching, never stopped protecting you." Alyssa's throat tightened. She clutched the photograph to her chest, overwhelmed by a mixture of grief, longing, and betrayal. She had spent her entire life believing she had no family left, no anchor in the world. And now, standing here in the mansion where she had suffered for years, she discovered she had not been alone after all. But there was no time to fall apart. The digital drive in the metal case pulsed like a heartbeat. Henry nodded toward it. "That's what Damien doesn't want anyone to find." Alyssa slid it into her pocket, feeling the weight of it settle against her like armor. She looked around the nursery at the soft blankets she had folded with shaking hands, at the tiny shoes lined neatly against the wall, at the faint stars painted on the ceiling. This room held her love and her fear, but it also held the truth she needed to rise again. Something stronger than panic stirred inside her. A new kind of strength, quiet, steady, undeniable. A strength that didn't come from fear or desperation, but from clarity. She had been surviving. Now she needed to fight. Alyssa wiped her tears and stood straighter. She glanced at the mirror across the room. The woman staring back looked exhausted, bruised, and shaken, but underneath the damage, Alyssa saw something else, a spark her suffering hadn't been able to extinguish. "You need to pack," Henry said gently. "We leave within the hour." Alyssa nodded. She gathered essentials, clothes, documents she could reach, her son's favorite blanket. She tucked the drive securely inside the baby's diaper bag. Every movement felt purposeful, every breath steadier than the last. Henry stepped into the hallway to keep watch, leaving her a moment alone. Alyssa stood in the center of the nursery, letting her fingers brush the crib's wooden frame. She thought of all the times she had curled beside it, crying silently so Damien wouldn't hear. No more tears, no more silence. She picked up her son, wrapping him in his blanket. "We're leaving, sweetheart," she whispered. "And I promise we're never coming back to this life." Downstairs, Damien's irritated voice echoed through the living room, still arguing with the lawyers, unaware that the narrative he controlled was slipping from his hands. Alyssa straightened her shoulders. She was no longer the woman he broke. She was the woman who would expose him. As she stepped into the hallway, Henry met her gaze with something like pride. For the first time, she believed she might survive this. She might win, and Damien, who thought he had buried every secret, had no idea what was coming. Because tonight, Alyssa wasn't running anymore. She was rising. The glass tower in downtown Los Angeles gleamed like a blade in the afternoon sun, its mirrored surface slicing through the sky. Damien Blackwood had chosen it for his quarterly board meeting because it impressed investors, intimidated competitors, and reminded everyone beneath him exactly who held the power. Today, however, the building felt different, almost restless, as if it sensed the shift rising beneath its polished floors. Inside the main boardroom, executives settled into high-backed chairs, glancing at their watches, unaware that the man they admired was minutes away from losing everything. Alyssa stepped out of the elevator on the top floor, her heels clicking with a certainty she hadn't felt in years. Gone was the trembling woman hiding behind fear. She wore a sharp black suit, her hair pulled back, her posture straight. Her son was safe with Henry's team across the street, guarded by men who would protect him with their lives. The digital drive sat warm in her bag like a quiet promise. Henry walked one step behind her, his presence steady, his expression unreadable. He had told her she didn't have to do this, he could handle everything, but Alyssa refused. Damien had humiliated her in public. Today, she would return the favor. The doors to the boardroom opened with a soft hiss. Dozens of faces turned. Damien froze mid-sentence, his expression flickering from confidence to irritation to something colder. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Scarlett, seated beside him, stiffened, her eyes narrowing. Alyssa took her place at the opposite end of the table, her calmness unnerving everyone present. "I'm here," she said evenly, "because you lied, because you hurt me, because you thought no one would ever see what you truly are." A murmur rippled across the room. Damien attempted a laugh. "Alyssa, this is hardly the place for—" "Then why?" she interrupted, pulling the digital drive from her bag. "Did you try to erase this?" Scarlett paled. Damien shot to his feet. "Don't you dare!" Henry stepped forward. "Sit down, Damien." For the first time, Damien hesitated. The room sensed it too. Alyssa plugged the drive into the boardroom screen. The lights dimmed. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. The footage began. Damien ordering the officer to take her child. Scarlett smirking behind him. Alyssa crying out, her body crumpling to the floor. The moment she begged for mercy. The moment none came. Several executives stood, horrified. Others whispered, exchanging looks that held both disbelief and disgust. Damien lunged toward the screen, but two security officers, Henry's men, blocked him. Scarlett tried to slip out the side door, but Henry's voice cut her escape short. "Sit. You're next." A second file played audio recordings Damien never knew existed. Conversations about money laundering, manipulating stock reports, plans to institutionalize Alyssa. Scarlett's voice encouraging him. Damien's voice agreeing. The boardroom erupted. "This is criminal. He's been lying to all of us. Call legal, now." Damien's face twisted in panic, the mask he'd worn for years collapsing. "Alyssa, think about what you're doing. You'll ruin us both." "You already ruined everything," she said quietly. "I'm just telling the truth." Sirens wailed outside. Federal agents stormed the hallway. Damien backed away, hands raised, fury shaking through him. "This isn't over," he roared as they cuffed his wrists. Alyssa met his eyes one final time. "Yes," she said, voice steady. "It is." Scarlett tried to run again, but agents stopped her, dragging her out, screaming. Executives avoided her gaze. The empire she had tried to steal crumbled around her just as quickly as her lies. Alyssa stood still, breathing deeply. For the first time in years, she felt the weight lift from her shoulders. And yet, something else waited beyond the door, someone who had come not just to witness her victory, but to shape the life she was finally free to rebuild. The boardroom emptied slowly, leaving behind the faint hum of the city floating through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Alyssa Morgan remained standing at the center of the room, steady and unshaken, the woman Damien once believed he could break. But the weight in her chest wasn't fear anymore. It was release, cold, clean, necessary. The kind that follows a storm powerful enough to strip away every lie. Henry stepped beside her, watching the federal agents escort Damien into the elevator in handcuffs. "It's over," he said softly. Alyssa nodded, but her breath trembled with the truth she hadn't spoken yet. "Not just because of what he did to me," she whispered, "but because he will never hurt my son again." Henry placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, pride softening his usually hardened gaze. As they exited the boardroom, a small crowd had gathered, executives, assistants, legal representatives, all murmuring with shock. Many lowered their eyes in shame. Some whispered apologies she didn't need. Alyssa walked past them with quiet grace. She wasn't looking for pity, nor validation. She wanted only one thing now: peace. The elevator doors opened, revealing the lobby bathed in warm afternoon light. At the center stood the person she had longed to see since the moment she pressed play on the footage. Her son, wrapped in Henry's protective jacket, held by a man Alyssa had not expected to return to her life, Julian West. He had once been a client during her stylist days, a gentle soul who had always treated her with dignity in a world that often overlooked her. Months ago, he had moved to New York for business, leaving behind a quiet affection neither of them dared to confess. Now, he looked at her as though the whole world had paused. "Alyssa," he said, his voice warm, steady. "You did it." She crossed the lobby slowly, her son reaching for her with a delighted cry. She took him into her arms, breathing in the sweet mix of sunscreen and baby shampoo. Her heart softened. Julian stepped closer. "He's been asking for you since we left the house," he said gently. Alyssa smiled faintly. "Thank you for keeping him safe." Julian hesitated, searching her eyes. "Henry called me. He said you might need someone who cares." She blinked, surprised. Henry simply shrugged. "He was right," he muttered. "You deserve people who show up." Outside, sirens faded into the distance as Damien was driven away. Scarlett, handcuffed and furious, was placed into a separate vehicle. The world Alyssa once lived in crumbled behind her, piece by poisoned piece, leaving only truth standing. Justice wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple, clean, and exacting, like the final crack of a gavel that closes every dark chapter cleanly. "You're free now," Julian said softly. Alyssa exhaled shakily. "I don't know what comes next." Julian gave her a small, hopeful smile. "Then let's figure it out. Together. At your pace. No pressure." Henry stepped forward. "You both deserve something good," he said, nodding. "Your mother would be proud, Alyssa." Tears filled her eyes, not from pain, but from a warmth she had never known. She looked at the two men standing before her, the father she never expected to find, and the man offering her a gentler future. Alyssa lifted her chin. "Let's go home," she said. "Where to?" Julian asked. She smiled, soft, real, unafraid. "Somewhere we choose, somewhere ours." They stepped through the lobby doors, sunlight bathing them in quiet gold. And as Alyssa walked into her new life, she understood one truth clearly: this wasn't her ending, it was her beginning. The drive back to the small townhouse Henry had arranged for them felt strangely peaceful, as if Los Angeles had paused to let Alyssa breathe. The city lights blurred through the windows while her son slept against her chest, his tiny breaths anchoring her to the present. Julian sat beside her in the back seat, giving her silent space. He didn't ask questions, didn't push for conversation. He simply stayed close, ready if she needed him. For the first time in years, Alyssa didn't feel watched, controlled, or judged. She felt safe. When they arrived, the townhouse felt warm despite its modest size. Soft lamps glowed in the living room, a gentle contrast to the cold brightness of the Blackwood mansion. Alyssa stepped inside slowly, almost cautiously, as though afraid the quiet comfort might shatter if she moved too quickly. Henry carried in a box of supplies, diapers, formula, and a few essentials he'd gathered. "You'll be here until everything settles," he said gently. "This place is secure. No one will come near you without going through me first." Alyssa nodded, absorbing the unfamiliar sensation of someone protecting her without expecting anything in return. Julian followed her into the kitchen, placing his keys on the counter. "If you need anything," he said softly, "anything at all, I'm here." She gave him a grateful smile, though exhaustion pressed against her bones. The adrenaline from the confrontation at the tower had faded, leaving room for the emotions she had been holding back. She settled her son into a portable crib Henry had set up near the window. As she watched him sleep, the weight of the past few weeks crashed over her. The betrayal, the fear, the humiliation Damien orchestrated, the terrifying night in the mansion. She sank onto the couch, her hands trembling uncontrollably. Henry noticed and sat beside her. "You held yourself together today," he said quietly. "You were stronger than you know." But Alyssa shook her head. "I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was breaking the whole time." Henry's voice softened. "Strength isn't about not breaking. It's about breaking and still choosing to stand." She swallowed hard, eyes stinging. She had stood trembling, bruised, terrified, but she had stood. Julian returned from the kitchen with 2 cups of tea. "You need to sleep," he said gently. "Your body's exhausted." Alyssa took a sip, feeling the warmth calm her. "Every time I close my eyes," she admitted, "I see him, I hear him, I feel everything again." Julian placed a hand on the back of the couch, near her shoulder but not touching. "Then don't close your eyes alone," he said softly. "We're here." Henry stood and gave her a reassuring nod before heading to the guest room down the hall. The house settled into quiet, the kind that didn't feel threatening but healing. Julian remained in the living room with her, watching the soft rise and fall of her son's chest. "He looks peaceful," he whispered. Alyssa nodded. "He deserves a life without fear." She leaned back, letting herself relax in the presence of someone who genuinely cared. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine a future one where laughter filled rooms instead of silence, where love didn't come with conditions, where her son grew up surrounded by safety rather than shadows. It felt almost unreal, yet possible. But the world outside hadn't gone silent. Damien's arrest was only the beginning. More secrets would surface, more battles would follow. Alyssa knew she wasn't done fighting, not yet. She wrapped her arms around herself, breathing in slowly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new revelations, new dangers. And as she looked toward the dark window, she felt it. Someone was already moving toward them, someone who wasn't ready to let the past die quietly. Night settled over the townhouse like a blanket hiding unfinished truths. Alyssa sat near the window, watching streetlights flicker across quiet pavement. Her son slept peacefully nearby, unaware of gathering threats outside. Julian brewed coffee softly, hoping warmth might steady Alyssa's shaking nerves. Henry paced the hallway, reviewing reports collected about Damien's associates. Trouble rarely ended cleanly, whenever powerful men were cornered publicly. Alyssa felt that truth lingering heavy around her chest tonight. She wondered whether Damien's allies planned retaliation to salvage themselves. Julian joined her quietly, offering reassurance without demanding conversation or explanations. His presence steadied her heartbeat more than he realized. Outside, a dark sedan slowed near the corner before disappearing deliberately. Henry noticed immediately and stepped onto the porch, scanning shadows carefully. Alyssa approached him, sensing tension rising again inside her ribs. Henry spoke calmly, saying surveillance teams identified unusual movement downtown. He believed someone within Blackwood Innovations still intended harming Alyssa. She swallowed fear, remembering Damien's threats whispered during quieter nights. Those memories returned swiftly, trapping her between dread and resolve. Julian touched her shoulder, gently grounding her back into safety. He promised they would face consequences together without leaving her alone. Alyssa believed him despite uncertainty swirling dangerously around their sanctuary. She breathed deeply, mustering courage forged through suffering Damien inflicted. Henry gathered them inside, explaining intercepted messages, suggesting Scarlett contacted criminals. Those criminals previously collaborated with Damien, laundering money internationally. Scarlett appeared desperate, searching protection after Damien's arrest collapsed her influence. Alyssa felt anxiety, knowing Scarlett viewed her as an obstacle. "She's unpredictable," Henry warned, tapping documents spread across the table. Julian reviewed photographs revealing Scarlett meeting unknown figures near warehouses. Evidence suggested plans forming rapidly within criminal circles tonight. Alyssa clenched her hands, realizing danger continued expanding despite Damien's removal. She asked Henry whether authorities were informed about impending threats. Henry nodded, saying agents monitored several suspects, but required confirmation. Alyssa knew what confirmation meant, revealing herself again publicly. The thought chilled her, though determination burned stronger underneath. Julian suggested relocation temporarily, until investigations deepened appropriately. But Alyssa refused, insisting she wouldn't hide forever anymore. Henry respected her bravery while preparing contingency plans silently. The townhouse lights flickered briefly, causing Alyssa to stiffen instantly. Henry moved toward the circuit panel, checking connections deliberately. "Someone tested our power grid," he murmured darkly. Alyssa held her son closer, sensing another unseen threat approaching. Julian locked each window, verifying latches with focused precision. Nightfall thickened surrounding the townhouse like protective armor and warning. Alyssa whispered softly, saying danger always returned whenever peace neared. Julian reassured her, promising unwavering support regardless circumstances ahead. Henry signaled silence, suddenly raising his hand toward the doorway. Footsteps approached cautiously from outside, crunching across gravel deliberately. Alyssa felt blood freeze, fearing Scarlett sent someone dangerous. The doorknob trembled slightly beneath subtle pressure, applied externally. Julian stepped forward, shielding Alyssa instinctively from possible harm. Henry reached his weapon, remaining composed, while assessing threats methodically. The footsteps stopped abruptly, leaving eerie silence hanging heavily. Alyssa clutched her son, thinking danger finally broken through. A soft, metallic click echoed across the doorway ominously. Julian breathed sharply, recognizing unmistakable sound, signaling forced entry. Henry motioned them backward, keeping barrel lowered yet ready. Alyssa whispered, trembling, asking whether they should escape immediately. Henry shook his head, saying danger remained unclear outside. Another shadow flickered across the frosted window briefly, then vanished. Alyssa braced herself, sensing decisive moment arriving swiftly now. Someone finally turned the handle, fully preparing to break inside. Alyssa tightened her grip around her child, praying courage would rise before fear consumed every fragile promise, still holding their future together. The door handle twisted slowly, deliberately, as if the person on the other side wanted everyone inside to hear it. Alyssa's heartbeat slammed against her ribs. She tightened her grip around her son, holding him so close she could feel the warmth of his tiny breaths against her collarbone. Julian positioned himself between her and the door, shoulders squared, eyes sharp. Henry raised his weapon but did not fire. He was waiting for clarity, control, the exact moment when threat became certainty. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then, a soft knock. Not gentle, not polite, a signal. Henry's jaw clenched. "Stay back," he ordered quietly. He stepped closer to the door, moving like a man who'd done this dance too many times before. He pressed his ear against the wood, listening. Another faint sound followed, a shuffle, the click of something metallic, a low whisper muffled by the barrier. Julian whispered, "Could be police." Henry shook his head. "Police don't test doorknobs and cut power grids." Alyssa swallowed hard, her pulse thundering in her ears. She glanced toward the back hallway, mapping out escape routes. Her legs trembled, but her mind raced with a clarity she never used to possess. The baby whimpered softly. She kissed his temple. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here." Suddenly the door jolted violently, slamming inward just an inch before the chain lock yanked it back. Alyssa gasped. Julian flinched. Henry steadied himself instantly. A harsh voice growled from outside. "Open the door, Callahan. We know she's in there." Henry's expression darkened. "Scarlett's hired muscle," he muttered. "Amateurs, but dangerous enough." Alyssa squeezed her son tighter. Fear crawled up her spine like a cold hand. "What do they want?" "You," Henry said. "Or the drive." Julian stepped toward Alyssa. "We're not giving them either." Another violent slam rattled the door frame. The chain strain growled under pressure, bending slightly. A second man joined in, hitting harder, faster. Dust sprinkled from the ceiling. Alyssa's breathing grew shallow. Every instinct inside her screamed to run, to hide, to flee from danger like she always had. But another instinct, new, fiercer, pressed against that fear. She wasn't the fragile, silent wife anymore. She was a mother, a survivor, a woman who had crushed a billionaire with truth. She would not be taken. "Henry," she whispered, "what do we do?" Before he could answer, a brick shattered the front window. Glass exploded inward, in a shower of glittering shards. Alyssa shielded her son. Julian lunged forward, grabbing a nearby chair as a weapon. Two men climbed through the broken window wearing black jackets and masks. Henry fired a warning shot into the ceiling. "Move another inch and I drop you." The men froze, but only for a heartbeat. The first lunged toward Henry. The second charged at Julian with a knife glinting in his sleeve. Alyssa stumbled backward, clutching her son, her breath ripping from her lungs in sharp bursts. Julian blocked the attacker with the chair, the wood cracking loudly against the man's arm. Henry tackled the other to the ground, their bodies crashing into the wall. Alyssa backed into the kitchen, her mind spinning. The second man broke free from Julian long enough to swing the knife toward her. Her scream cut through the house. Julian grabbed the man, slamming him into the counter. Henry pinned the first attacker with a decisive blow that knocked him unconscious. The second man staggered toward the door, panicking. Julian grabbed him again, but he slipped through the shattered window and disappeared into the darkness outside. Henry cursed under his breath. "They'll be back," he said. "They weren't here to kill. They were testing the perimeter." Alyssa's knees buckled. Julian rushed to her, steadying her gently. Her son began crying, frightened by the chaos. Alyssa kissed his forehead, her lips trembling. "Why?" she whispered. "Why won't they stop?" Henry met her eyes. "Because you're no longer just Damien's victim," he said. "You're the woman who destroyed him." Alyssa felt the truth settle deep in her chest, heavy, frightening, empowering. And out there, in the shifting dark beyond the window, someone else was watching, waiting for their next move. The shattered glass still glittered across the living room floor like fallen stars when Henry secured the door with temporary braces. Julian swept the area carefully, checking corners and windows as if danger might still be hiding in the cracks. Alyssa stood near the hallway holding her son close, her arms aching from the tension of never letting go. The house that felt safe hours earlier now felt exposed, fragile, penetrated by shadows, hungry for something she still didn't fully understand. Henry finally turned toward her. "They weren't here to succeed tonight," he said. "They were here to measure response time, positions, weaknesses. Scarlet didn't send them to win, she sent them to gather." Alyssa felt the chills settle into her bones. "She's planning something bigger." Julian joined them, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Henry, what are we dealing with? Damien's gone. Why risk this much just for Scarlet?" Henry hesitated, his expression tightening. "Because Scarlet isn't just a disgraced attorney. She's connected to people Damien used when Blackwood Innovations funneled money through offshore networks. People with their own agendas. People who don't want the rest of Damien's secrets uncovered." Alyssa hugged her son tighter. "And they think I know something." Henry nodded. "You have the drive. And the drive leads to more than domestic abuse or financial fraud. It exposes an entire network." Alyssa felt her stomach twist. She glanced toward the diaper bag where the digital drive was hidden. It had been just a piece of metal to her hours ago, but now it felt like the most dangerous object in Los Angeles. "What's on it?" she whispered. Henry took a slow breath. "Proof of Damien's offshore accounts. Illegal transfers. Names of people involved. Email logs. Voice recordings." He paused. "And evidence linking Damien to your mother's disappearance." Alyssa's heart stopped. "My mother?" she whispered. She died in an accident." Henry looked at her with a grief so deep it made her knees weaken. "That's what they wanted you to believe. The crash wasn't accidental, Alyssa. She had discovered something Damien and his associates needed buried." Alyssa shook her head, struggling to breathe. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I had no proof," Henry said, voice rough. "And if Damien had known I was alive, you would have been targeted years ago." Alyssa pressed a trembling hand against her forehead. The room blurred for a moment. Her mother, Damien, all these years. All the silence. All the things Alyssa blamed herself for, every abandonment, every unanswered question. She hadn't been wrong. She had been lied to. Julian crouched in front of her, steady, grounding. "Alyssa, you're not alone in this. You have us." She closed her eyes for a moment, drawing in a shaky breath. When she opened them again, she felt something sharper beneath her grief, anger. Not the wild, drowning anger she once feared, but a focused flame. "They want the drive?" she whispered. "Then we use it." Henry's brows rose. "How?" "By finishing what I started at the boardroom," she said. "By exposing every last one of them." Henry studied her, surprised by her resolve. Julian nodded with quiet pride. But before they could discuss further, a vibration buzzed across the table. A message. From a number Alyssa didn't recognize, but her chest tightened anyway, instinct warning her something wasn't right. She picked up the phone with trembling fingers. A single line appeared. "You're not safe with them, Alyssa. I know where your son belongs." Her breath caught. Julian stepped forward. "What does it say?" Alyssa looked up slowly, pulse pounding in her ears. "It's Scarlet," she whispered. "She knows where we are." Henry cursed under his breath, grabbing his jacket. "We need to move, now." But before they could take a step, headlights flared through the front window, bright, blinding, deliberate. A vehicle had pulled up to the townhouse. Not one, three. Alyssa's stomach dropped. Someone had come to collect what they believed belonged to Damien, and they weren't planning to knock this time. The sudden glare of headlights washed through the living room, throwing fractured shadows across the broken glass still scattered on the floor. Alyssa froze, clutching her son instinctively as the rumble of engines vibrated through the walls. Henry reached the window first and peeked through the edge of the blinds, shoulders tightening. Julian stepped beside him, jaw clenched, eyes narrowing. 3 SUVs, dark, unmarked, idling with deliberate menace. "They're not here to scare us this time," Henry muttered. "They're here to take something or someone." Alyssa felt her throat tighten. She stepped backward, cradling her son closer, the baby's small fingers gripping her sweater. "Is it Scarlet?" she whispered. "No," Henry said softly. "Scarlet doesn't have this kind of manpower. This is bigger, bigger." The word struck Alyssa like a cold blade. Julian moved quickly, locking doors, checking windows. "We need to get Alyssa and the baby out the back." Henry shook his head. "They've covered the alley. See the silhouettes? They've boxed us in." A pounding noise erupted from the porch, a fist slamming the front door with brutal force. Alyssa jumped. Her son whimpered. Henry motioned for silence. Another hit, then another. Wood cracked at the hinges. "Henry Callahan," a deep voice shouted from outside. "You have something that doesn't belong to you," Julian whispered sharply. "They're here for the drive." "No," Henry corrected, eyes grim. "They're here for Alyssa." Alyssa felt her blood run cold. Julian moved to her side instantly. "They're not touching her," he said fiercely. "Not while we're breathing." Another blow struck the door, splintering the frame. Henry pulled his phone and dialed. "We need backup. Now," he said into the receiver. 3 vehicles, possibly armed. Send a full response." A pause. His face hardened. "They cut the signal tower nearby," he said quietly after lowering the phone. "No calls are getting out." Panic sparked in Alyssa's chest, but she fought to steady her breathing. She needed clarity, not fear. Her son depended on it. Henry gestured toward the hallway. "Go to the safe room." Alyssa blinked. "Safe room?" Julian nodded. "Every Callahan property has one." Henry led them down the hall just as another violent impact shook the front door. Alyssa's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the footsteps rushing outside. The hallway lights flickered again once, twice, then stabilized. Henry pushed aside a bookshelf, revealing a steel door disguised in the wall. He entered a code, then pulled it open. Alyssa hesitated. "What about you two?" Julian gave her a soft, determined smile. "We're right behind you. Go." Before she entered, another crash echoed through the house. The front door finally gave way, splitting open with a deafening crack. Men poured in, shadows with weapons, their boots slamming against hardwood. Julian shoved Alyssa inside the safe room and slammed the steel door shut. Her son began crying, frightened by the noise. Alyssa rocked him desperately, pressing her forehead against his tiny shoulder, whispering, I've got you. Mommy's here. Outside. Kay's erupted. A shout. Heavy footsteps. A struggle. Julian's voice. Don't touch him. A crash. Something large falling over. A gunshot. Alyssa gasped, pressing her hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. Tears blurred her vision as her son whimpered. She pressed his face to her chest, shielding him from the terror outside. Henry's voice roared, "Get back! Drop the weapon!" Another gunshot. Silence. Alyssa's heart hammered painfully. Every nerve in her body screamed for her to run to them, to tear open the door. But she couldn't. She had to protect her child. She had to trust Henry and Julian with her life. Seconds crawled like hours. Then a sound. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, approaching the safe room, stopping right outside. A loud voice seeped through the steel. "Open the door, Alyssa." She froze. It wasn't Henry. It wasn't Julian. It was a voice she never expected to hear again. Damien. The voice on the other side of the steel door slid through the air like ice down Alyssa's spine. Damien. Alive. Free. Standing only inches away. Her breath caught, her arms tightening instinctively around her son, who whimpered softly, sensing her fear. She pressed her back against the cold steel, as if her body alone could stop him from breaking through. "Alyssa," Damien called again, calmer this time, too calm. "Open the door. You know I don't like being kept waiting." Her pulse pounded so loudly she could barely hear him. Damien wasn't supposed to be anywhere near her. Federal custody, restraints, transport vehicle, court orders. All of that had shattered. How? What deal had he made? Who had he bribed? What strings had he pulled to get here? A low chuckle drifted through the door. "You're wondering how I got out." His tone sharpened. "Money opens every lock, sweetheart. Even the ones built specifically to keep me in." Alyssa swallowed hard, holding her son closer. She tried to steady her breathing so he wouldn't feel her shaking. "You have something of mine," Damien continued. "Both of you." Her stomach twisted. "You're not taking him," she whispered, though the steel door hid her voice. "Oh, I will," Damien said softly. "He'll be raised properly, without your weakness poisoning him. And as for you..." A loud crash cut him off, furniture shoved, a body thrown, maybe a fight resuming somewhere in the living room. Alyssa flinched but refused to move from the door. Damien exhaled impatiently. "I don't have time for this, Alyssa. That drive belongs to me. You belong to me." His tone dropped into something darker. "Open the door, or I promise you'll regret what happens next." Then, another voice. Julian, but faint, strained. "Don't touch her." Alyssa's breath broke into pieces. He was alive, but barely. She pressed her palm to the steel door, torn between terror and fury. Damien's boots scraped against the floor as he shifted his stance. "Ah, yes. The hero," Damien muttered. "He's resilient, I'll give him that. But he's delaying the inevitable." Another struggle echoed Henry's voice this time, deeper, angrier, but slurred. Alyssa heard a grunt, the unmistakable sound of someone hitting the ground hard. "No," she whispered. "No, no." Damien leaned closer to the door. She could hear his breath now, steady and confident. "Do you think these men can protect you? Do you think anyone can?" His voice turned almost tender. "I built the world around you. I controlled every step you took. You can't outrun someone who knows your every weakness." Alyssa's shaking slowed. Not from fear, from something else, something that had been building piece by piece through every betrayal, every bruise, every humiliation. Strength. Slow, deliberate strength. She shifted her son to one arm and reached for the steel wall where Henry had shown her the emergency release system. A panic latch, a distress beacon, a hidden drawer containing... She slid it open quietly. A small weapon rested inside, a fail-safe. Damien kept talking. "You can open this door now, Alyssa, or I'll take it down. Either way, you'll be facing me." Alyssa lifted the weapon with her free hand, her grip steady despite the tremor running through her spine. Her reflection stared back at her in the polished steel, tired, hollowed, but no longer afraid. Damien knocked once slow, controlled. "Alyssa," he said almost gently, Let Daddy in. Her heart cracked, but not with fear, with resolve. She stepped closer to the door, her voice low, steady, unrecognizable even to herself. "Damien," she said, "you will never touch my child again." Silence spread on the other side. Then footsteps slow, calculating, moved toward the hinges. Damien braced himself. Alyssa did too, because the moment that door opened, the hunted wasn't going to be her anymore. Damien's footsteps moved with the confidence of a man convinced the world still belonged to him. Alyssa stood inches from the steel door, the small weapon heavy in her hand, her son tucked tightly against her chest. His tiny heartbeat fluttered against her skin, reminding her of the only truth that mattered now. Survive, protect, win. A faint buzzing echoed above her, the ventilation system kicking on. Henry had mentioned earlier that the safe room had its own air supply and emergency sensors. She prayed it still worked. She prayed he was still alive. She prayed Julian hadn't given his last breath, trying to keep Damien from reaching her. "Do you hear that?" Damien asked from the other side of the door, amused. "That's the safe room's oxygen cycling. You know what that means? You're running out of time. Those systems shut off automatically if there's a breach in power." He paused. "And I caused a very intentional breach tonight." Alyssa steadied her breath. He was lying partially. Power had flickered earlier. He had men outside. He was trying to shake her resolve. She wasn't shaking. Not anymore. "You always underestimate me," she said quietly, loud enough for her voice to slip through the crack beneath the door. "That's your mistake." Damien laughed. "No, Alyssa. My mistake was letting you think you mattered. But don't worry, I'll correct that in a moment." His tone sharpened. "Step back from the door." Alyssa didn't move. Metal groaned. Damien was prying at the locking mechanism, using something heavy, maybe a crowbar, maybe a weapon. Each sound rattled down Alyssa's spine, but she refused to back away. She pressed her cheek to her son's hair and whispered, "Mommy's right here. Mommy's strong." Another slam. Then a grunt of frustration. Footsteps again, pacing, stopping, thinking. Damien was calculating his angle, planning his breach. Alyssa could almost picture the way he tilted his head when he grew irritated, the way his jaw ticked when the world refused to obey him. But something else slipped through the silence, another breath. Softer, pained. "Julian." Alyssa pressed closer to the steel. "Julian?" she whispered, unable to stop herself. A small groan answered her. Damien scoffed. "Don't worry about him. He'll survive if I let him." Rage surged through Alyssa so fiercely she felt her vision sharpen. Damien had taken enough. Her fear, her safety, her motherhood, her peace, her trust in love, her belief in the world. He had stolen pieces of her until she barely recognized the reflection in the mirror. But tonight, she'd seen something different in that reflection strength. Fire, a version of herself Damien had never expected to face. She positioned herself beside the door, out of the direct line of entry. She held the weapon against her thigh, hidden from view. Her breath steadied. A loud metallic crack filled the air, the top hinge snapping loose. One more hit, and Damien would be inside. But he'd be walking into a trap. Henry's voice suddenly echoed faintly from the living room, hoarse, strained, but alive. "Alyssa, don't open, don't trust." A sharp thud cut him off. Damien chuckled. "Stubborn old man. Now," he whispered, "let's finish this." He struck the last hinge. The steel door buckled. Screws tore from the frame. The bottom edge scraped loudly against the tile floor. Alyssa's heart pounded once, deep, steady. She shifted her weight to her back foot. Readied herself. "Damien Roarez, move." The door crashed inward. Light burst into the safe room. Damien's shadow filled the doorway. And Alyssa moved with a clarity she'd never possessed before. Because tonight was no longer about fear. It was about reclaiming every piece of herself he had tried to destroy. And the moment Damien stepped inside, Alyssa stepped out of his control forever. The steel door slammed against the wall with a violent clang, dust drifting through the air as Damien Blackwood stormed inside with the force of a predator cornering its prey. His suit was torn, his face flushed with fury, and a thin streak of blood crawled from his temple, evidence that Henry and Julian had fought hard before falling. His eyes locked onto Alyssa with a chilling mixture of triumph and obsession. "Alyssa," he breathed, stepping forward. "This ends now." But she wasn't standing where he expected. She had positioned herself against the wall beside the door, her son protected behind a heavy metal cabinet Henry had bolted into the corner earlier. The moment Damien crossed the threshold, Alyssa slid into view, weapon raised, hands steady despite the tremor in her ribs. "You don't give orders anymore," she said quietly. Damien froze. Shock flickered across his face, quickly replaced by amusement. "You're pointing a gun at the father of your children?" he mocked. "You don't have the spine." "You don't get to decide what spine looks like," she said. "Not anymore." Damien took a deliberate step forward. "You won't shoot. You never could." Alyssa didn't move, her stance still, and focused each breath, measured not by fear but purpose. Her hands did not shake, and that alone made Damien pause. "You almost killed us," she said, voice low. "You nearly destroyed everything I had left. You hurt Henry. You hurt Julian. You tried to take my child. You think I won't protect him now?" Damien's smirk faltered. Behind him, a faint groan echoed from the hallway. Julian, still alive. Alyssa felt strength surge from the sound. Damien turned his head just slightly toward the noise, and that was all the opening she needed. Alyssa kicked the fallen steel hinge on the floor, sending it clattering loudly against the opposite wall. Damien flinched instinctively, his reflexes betraying him. Alyssa lunged forward, grabbing the fire extinguisher Henry had hidden behind the cabinet. She swung. The heavy metal cylinder cracked against Damien's arm, knocking the weapon he'd been holding loose. It skidded across the floor. Damien cursed and grabbed her wrist, shoving her backward. The extinguisher clattered loudly as she lost her grip, but she'd bought the seconds she needed. Alyssa scrambled toward her son. Damien grabbed her ankle, yanking her back. She hit the floor hard, air knocked from her lungs. Pain radiated through her ribs, but she rolled, using her momentum to kick at his knee. Damien grunted. She crawled toward the cabinet, desperate to shield her son again, but Damien caught her hair, pulling her up brutally. "You think you can fight me?" he snarled into her ear. "I made you." Alyssa twisted sharply, slamming her elbow into his ribs. He doubled over, just as Henry appeared in the doorway, bloodied but standing. "Alyssa, down." She dropped instantly. Henry fired. The bullet struck Damien in the shoulder, spinning him backward into the metal shelving. He collapsed, groaning, rage twisting his features into something monstrous. Henry stepped inside, gun trained steadily. "You should have stayed in custody," Henry said, voice cold with decades of buried fury. Damien laughed through the pain. "You can't kill me. You don't have it in you." Henry's eyes hardened. "You don't know what fathers do for their daughters." Damien's face drained of color. He understood. Finally, he understood. Sirens wailed in the distance, closer, louder, converging on the townhouse. Julian staggered into the hallway, clutching the doorframe, barely standing but alive. Alyssa rushed to him, supporting his weight with her shoulder. Damien tried to rise. Henry kicked the gun away and pinned him down. "It's over," Alyssa said, steady, unbroken. Damien looked up at her with hatred, disbelief, and finally fear, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't in control. And as flashing red lights washed through the shattered window, the empire of Damien Blackwood collapsed at the feet of the woman he tried to destroy. Red and blue lights washed over the townhouse like a rising dawn made of sirens and steel. Officers rushed through the door with weapons drawn, moving with precision as they assessed the chaos. Shattered windows, overturned furniture, blood smeared across the hardwood. Damien Blackwood lay on the floor, pinned beneath Henry's boot, clutching his wounded shoulder, still muttering threats even as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Alyssa held her son close, her body shaking not from fear now, but from the overwhelming release of having survived the unthinkable. Julian leaned heavily against the wall nearby, one arm still braced over his ribs, sweat beading at his temples. He looked exhausted, pale, and bruised, but when his eyes met hers, relief softened his expression. "You're safe," he whispered. She nodded, her throat tightening. "You are too." For the first time, she allowed herself a long breath, letting her heart steady against the chaos. Officers swarmed Damien, reading his rights, though he laughed bitterly through the pain. "You think this changes anything?" he hissed at Alyssa as they hauled him upright. "You think you've won?" Alyssa stepped forward, her son nestled securely against her chest. She met Damien's gaze with a calm he had never seen in her before. "No," she said quietly. "I didn't win. You lost. You lost the moment you raised your hand to me. And you lost every last piece of power when you touched our son with cruelty in your heart." The officers dragged Damien out, his curses fading as he was shoved into the back of a police car. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering in shock, but Alyssa didn't care. The night air smelled sharp, cold, and strangely clean, as if the world itself was clearing space for something new. Paramedics moved through the house next. One knelt beside Henry. "Sir, you need stitches." Henry waved him off. "Later. My daughter comes first." Alyssa's eyes widened. "Daughter." The word settled in her chest like a warm ember. She reached for Henry's hand. "You kept your promise," she whispered. He swallowed hard. "I'd keep it again." Every time. Another paramedic examined Julian, lifting his shirt to check the bruising along his ribs. He winced, but tried to laugh it off. "I'm fine, really." "No, you're not," Alyssa said, her voice hushed but firm. "You stepped between me and a knife. You're not allowed to call that fine." Julian gave her a small smile, the kind that held affection and something deeper he hadn't yet spoken aloud. "You're worth stepping in front of things for." Her breath caught. Before she could respond, an officer approached, holding a sealed evidence bag. "Miss Morgan," he said respectfully, "we recovered this on the suspect. It appears he intended to use it to breach the room." Inside the bag was a small black device, a code breaker. Damien must have been seconds away from getting through the steel door by force. Alyssa shivered. A moment later, another officer handed Henry a folder. "What's this?" Henry asked. The officer glanced at Alyssa. "A list of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and payments. Enough to implicate every associate who helped Damien escape custody tonight." Alyssa felt a strange shift inside her, as if her strength rearranged itself into something sharp and purposeful. "So this doesn't end with Damien?" "No," the officer said. "This ends with everyone he ever pulled into his crimes." The words settled over her like armor. As paramedics guided Julian outside and officers continued gathering evidence, Alyssa stood in the doorway holding her son, watching the night slowly calm. The breeze brushed through her hair gently, almost like a blessing. She had survived. She had fought. She had shattered Damien's empire and uncovered the truth buried beneath years of lies. But justice wasn't finished yet, because as she stepped into the cool air beside Julian and Henry, Alyssa Morgan understood that the final chapter of her story wasn't about running anymore. It was about rising into everything she deserved. Morning sunlight drifted across the small townhouse like a gentle apology for the night before. Alyssa Morgan stood by the kitchen window, her son asleep against her shoulder, his little hand curled into her sweater. The quiet felt unreal, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if she believed she was finally safe. She did. For the first time in years, she truly did. Henry sat at the table, a bandage across his forehead, sipping coffee with the slow steadiness of a man who had survived too many battles to rush a peaceful morning. Julian leaned against the counter nearby, his ribs wrapped, his smile soft, watching Alyssa as though he still couldn't believe she was standing here alive, free, unbroken. "You two should rest," Alyssa said gently. Julian chuckled. "We could say the same for you." She smiled, brushing her fingers through her son's hair. "I don't think I've slept properly since." "Everything." Henry set his mug down. "You'll sleep soon. Real sleep. The kind without fear." Alyssa's chest warmed. That promise meant more than anything. The world outside had begun its transformation too. News of Damien Blackwood's arrest and his dramatic attempt to escape spread across media outlets like wildfire. Reporters replayed the footage from the Glass Tower boardroom. Legal experts speculated about the charges piling against him. Former associates scrambled to deny involvement. And Scarlett Voss, caught on surveillance trying to flee the country, faced her own long list of indictments. None of them would see freedom for a very long time. Alyssa's phone buzzed. A message from the district attorney read, "We begin proceedings next week. Your evidence is invaluable. Thank you for your courage." Courage, a word she never thought belonged to her. But it did now. Julian stepped closer, placing a warm hand on her arm. "They'll protect you," he said softly. "Legally, physically, whatever you need." Alyssa looked up at him, her eyes meeting the steady tenderness she had once been too afraid to trust. Julian held her gaze as though asking permission to hope. "I want you to stay," he said, "not because you need protection, but because I care for you, deeply." Her breath caught. Emotion rose in her throat, raw and unexpected. "Julian, everything is still so new." "I know," he answered gently. "I'm not asking for a decision today. I'm asking for the chance to be someone good in your life. Someone steady." His voice softened. "Someone you can build something with if you want to." Alyssa felt tears prick her eyes. Healing wasn't instant. But standing here, safe with her son and the two men who fought beside her, she realized she didn't feel broken anymore. She felt ready. Henry rose from the table, walking toward her with a small envelope. "Your mother wanted you to have this," he said, placing it in her hand. Alyssa opened it slowly. "Adid, to a lakeside cabin in Tahoe, their private refuge from years ago. A place filled with memories, love, and beginnings that were never allowed to continue. It's yours now," Henry said softly. "A home, a legacy." Alyssa pressed the deed to her heart. Her mother's handwriting on the back read, "For my Alyssa, build something beautiful." Tears finally fell. Julian stepped closer. "We can go there whenever you're ready." She wiped her cheeks, smiling through the emotion. "I think I'd like that." Henry placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "This is your new start, sweetheart." Alyssa looked toward the door, the same door danger had once tried to break through. Now it stood quietly, sunlight glowing across its surface. She took a deep breath, holding her son close. "This is our life now," she whispered. "A life we choose." Julian reached for her free hand. Henry stood beside her like an unshakable pillar. And with that, Alyssa Morgan stepped forward into her future. A future built not from survival, but from strength, love, and the peace she had finally earned. So, our story finally closes here. And if you are still with me at this moment, my friend, then something in Alyssa's journey must have touched your heart in a way only real hurt and real healing can. Maybe you've walked through shadows of your own. Maybe you've learned, just like she did, that strength isn't loud. It's choosing to stand even after life has knocked you down. The Stoics said, "The obstacle is the way." And Alyssa's path shows exactly that pain can become power, and wounds can become wisdom. Her story reminds us that we all deserve safety, dignity, and love that doesn't hurt. And no matter how dark things get, there is always a turning point waiting, sometimes powered by truth, sometimes by courage, sometimes by the quiet decision to fight for yourself. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." If you felt something today, if this journey stirred a memory or gave you strength, do one small thing. Like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to our channel. Because maybe, just maybe, this is exactly the kind of story someone else needs tonight.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.